This is the story of a gold rush which began nearly 150 years ago, south of the Barossa Valley near Gawler in South Australia. The Barossa Gold Rush began in October 1868. It started with 6 men, and within a week there were 500, and in a month nearly 6,000 people on the goldfields. Gawler, the gateway to the Barossa Valley, is 43 kilometres northeast of Adelaide. Sandy Creek in the Cockatoo Valley is a further 8 kilometres east of Gawler. The Barossa Valley is one of Australia's oldest and the world's finest wine-producing regions. First settled in 1842 by European immigrants, it retains its old world charm. There are over 150 wineries and 70 cellar doors. It is famous for wine, seasonal produce, artisan food producers and award-winning restaurants. The Victorian gold rushes began in 1851 near Ballarat. Thousands of people were caught up in gold fever and travelled there. The South Australian government tried to slow the loss of population to Victoria. It offered a reward of £1,000 for the first person to discover a payable gold mine in South Australia. This is Jobe Harris, who in 1868 was publican of the Sandy Creek Hotel. In 1868, a prospector or shepherd found indications of gold in Spike Gully and spoke to Jobe Harris, but several ears may have been listening. Spike Gully is about 6 kilometres south of Sandy Creek. Jobe Harris set out with 6 men in late September 1868 with the aim of discovering gold. They sank a shaft in Spike Gully, and on Friday, 2nd October 1868, they found gold. The shaft had reached more than 4 metres and more than 1 ounce of gold had been accumulated before their operations attracted attention. It was the start of the largest gold rush in South Australia. Other people soon arrived, started digging, and also found gold. The gold rush commenced. By Monday, 5th October 1868, 50 people had arrived, and within a week between 1,500 and 2,000 people had made their way to the diggings. The creek was lined with men and women for a length of 4 kilometres. Being in a settled district, most of the early prospectors were locals. Towns in the Barossa Valley temporarily lost most of their male population. The discovery was reported in the South Australian Advertiser on 6th October. There is no doubt as to the existence of considerable quantities of gold in the neighbourhood of Lindock Valley, and of a quality remarkable for its purity, equal in fact to the best Ballarat samples. About a week after Jobe Harris's discovery, unofficial figures had become available about the amount of gold obtained. Several diggers had taken as much as 450 grams of gold home. The bank at Tanunda weighed and bought a total of 4 kilograms of gold from local residents. Other banks reported the same story. Soon almost 6,000 prospectors were on site. Within the first week, the block of Crown land was proclaimed an official goldfield subject to the gold licence regulations, and a warden of goldfields and a police trooper were dispatched to settle disputes and issue licences. Initially, gold was won at shallow depth from alluvial soils in Spike Gully, and weekly production varied from 100 to 500 ounces. The gold was described as being good nuggety gold, some pieces as big as horse beans. Almost anything and everything was soon available on the field. The only commodity lacking, but needed most, was water. Canvas and calico tents were everywhere on the hillsides. Most of the tents, though, were of primitive construction. The hills were covered with trees, but rapidly cut down for tent posts, fuel, and any other purpose. The rush reached its peak about 3 weeks after discovery, when about 4,000 licences had been issued. As a great deal of gold was quietly taken away from the Barossa diggings, besides what was sold on the diggings, the true value of the discovery will never be known. The initial diggings were sunk in soft alluvial river-wash deposits to depths of between 2 and 6 metres in Spike Gully. But as the miners moved to the surrounding hillsides, old riverbeds or deep leads were discovered and shafts up to 40 metres in depth were sunk, often through a capping of solid rock called Barossa cement. As the surface gave no indication of the course which the buried rivers had taken, the search for deep leads was very much a gamble, and after many weeks of sinking a shaft, the wash dirt may have proved poor in gold. When the shaft reached the wash dirt, which was often cemented, tunnels were put out to each part of the claim to test the wash dirt, which in places averaged 1 to 2 ounces of gold per tonne. The principal cement hill rushes were Goddard's Hill and Victoria Hill in 1869. Cement from Victoria Hill averaged half to 1.5 ounces per tonne, with nuggets of up to 7 ounces being recorded. The diggings on Victoria Hill are still remarkably intact. More than 100 shafts had been sunk in an attempt to reach the ancient river channels, buried below sand, gravel, clay and cement. The new towns of Yatta and Victoria Hill sprang up when diggers established their wives or families on the field. A third town, named Barossa, also gained a substantial population and notoriety. It had a population of several thousand by the middle of 1869. 7 hotels, 7 general stores, 3 blacksmiths and other establishments. Later it gained a school and institute. It remained populated until the 1950s. Today there is no signage, but the signs of settlement and early diggings are still there. 2 batteries of 7 and 15 heads were established in late 1869 in Green Gully near the Barossa Reservoir. Results from crushing were lower than expected. Crushers became one of the most important means of separating the gold from its conglomerate or cement on the Barossa Goldfield. After crushing, it had to be washed across plates coated with mercury. The gold adhered to the mercury and was then separated through a heat process. By late 1870, only about 100 men remained on the field, reworking old claims, and many prospectors had moved on to new fields in the Adelaide Hills. New discoveries brought diggers back with Sims Rush in 1887 and Yatta Hill in 1889, but these were quickly worked out. The nature of the gold at Sims Rush led miners to suspect there was a deep lead on an adjoining property, and several companies were formed from 1887 to 1891. In the 1890s, companies were formed to work newly found reefs between Victoria Hill and South Parra River. The Comet Syndicate, Royal Phoenix, Horseshoe Bend and Menzies Barossa Gold Mining Companies. A horse-drawn tramway linking all tunnels and a 40-head battery capable of treating 600 tonnes a week were built. In 1898, 100 men were employed. Alas, the first crushing of 1,500 tonnes of ore in 1898 yielded only 74 ounces of gold, way below expectations. Operations immediately ceased and the company went into liquidation. This brought an end to gold mining on the Barossa field, except for a period of reworking during the Great Depression years of the 1930s. It is estimated that 25,000 ounces, or 778 kilograms, were produced between 1868 and 1871. At today's price of approximately $1,650 per ounce, a wealth of over $41 million. Jobe Harris died in 1882. He was buried at the Williston Cemetery just north of Gawler. He was not immediately paid the government reward for discovering the goldfield. Eventually enough gold was found to make it possible for him to claim the reward, but only £750 was paid and it had to be split 6 ways, £125 each. Buried nearby Jobe Harris is the noted Gawler industrialist James Martin, who manufactured many items of machinery used on the goldfields. His is another important story worth telling. Today, much of the Barossa's wealth is still won from the ground, through good soil, sunshine, vines and fermentation. Today's rush is of the many visitors at the local wineries.